On the morning of June 30th, 1956, two passenger planes departed Los Angeles bound for the Midwest, but in a catastrophic turn of events, neither would reach their destinations. Over the Grand Canyon, the planes collided in mid-air, resulting in the deadliest aviation disaster of its time. 128 lives were lost, and the accident exposed critical flaws in aviation safety, leading to sweeping changes that continue to shape the industry today. This is the story of the Grand Canyon mid-air collision, a tragedy that forever changed how we fly. The mid-20th century was a transformative period for commercial aviation. In the years following World War II, aviation technology advanced rapidly, fueled by wartime innovation. Aircraft became faster, more reliable, and capable of carrying larger numbers of passengers over longer distances. For the first time, flying coast to coast in the United States became not only possible, but increasingly common. By the 1950s, passenger aviation was experiencing what many called its golden age. Flying was still a luxury, a privilege reserved for those who could afford it. Airlines promoted the experience as glamorous, offering in-flight meals, attentive service, and the promise of adventure. Travelers dressed for the occasion, and boarding a plane was seen as an event in itself. However, this growing popularity brought challenges. Most planes in the skies meant busier airports and congested airways. At the time, air traffic control relied on basic radar systems, with controllers issuing clearances primarily for takeoff and landing. Once airborne, pilots often navigated based on visual landmarks and limited radio guidance, adhering to the loosely regulated Visual Flight Rules, also called VFR. At that time, in those conditions, two iconic aircraft emerged as leaders in the skies. The first was the Lockheed Super Constellation, operated by Trans World Airlines, TWA. With its sleek design, three-tailed assembly, and powerful engines, the Super Connie was a marvel of its time. It could fly higher, farther, and faster than most of its predecessors, setting a new standard for passenger comfort and reliability. The second was the Douglas DC-7, a flagship aircraft for United Airlines. The DC-7 was a direct competitor to the Super Constellation, boasting even greater range and speed. Its four engines and advanced design allowed it to dominate long-haul routes, making it a favorite for airlines aiming to connect distant cities without refueling stops. On July 30th, 1956, these two aircraft prepared to depart Los Angeles International Airport. The TWA Super Constellation, carrying 70 passengers and crew, was bound for Kansas City, Missouri. The United DC-7, with 58 people on board, was headed to Chicago. Piloting the TWA Flight 2 aircraft was Captain Jack Gandy, a highly experienced aviator with nearly 15,000 flight hours. Alongside him were First Officer James Rittner and Flight Engineer Forrest Breyfogle. The Douglas DC-7 was piloted by Captain Robert Shirley, who at that time had amassed over 16,000 flight hours during his long career with United. He was joined by First Officer Robert Harms, a former World War II pilot, and Flight Engineer Gerard Fiore. Both flights departed Los Angeles within minutes of each other. TWA Flight 2 lifted off at 9:01 a.m., followed closely by United Flight 718 at 9:04 a.m. Their initial headings would take them northeast over California and into Arizona, where they would intersect navigational waypoints like Daggett and Needles before continuing toward their respective destinations. Shortly after takeoff, Captain Gandy of the TWA Flight 2 requested permission to ascend to 21,000 feet, hoping to climb above the clouds and provide passengers with smoother air. However, this request was denied by air traffic control because United Flight 718 was already cruising at that altitude. Unwilling to remain in turbulent air, Captain Gandy opted to switch to Visual Flight Rules, VFR. Under VFR, pilots rely on their ability to see and avoid other aircraft rather than strictly adhering to assigned altitudes. Air traffic control approved the request, unaware of the potentially hazardous implications. At the time, VFR was a common practice, particularly in the less regulated upper airspace. By 10:30 a.m., both planes were maneuvering over the Grand Canyon. navigating around clouds at the same altitude of 21,000 feet. The pilots had also deviated slightly from their planned routes, likely to provide passengers with a breathtaking view of the canyon below, which at that time too was a common practice when scenic detours were often encouraged to enhance the flight experience. Tragically, neither crew realized how close they were to one another. The limited visibility from cloud cover, coupled with the constraints of the cockpit's design, meant that neither plane could see the other until it was too late. At approximately 10:30 a.m., as the two aircraft crossed paths near Chua Butte on the eastern side of the Grand Canyon, disaster struck. United Flight 718's left wing sliced through the rear fuselage of TWA Flight 2, severing its tail and causing it to plummet into the canyon below. The super constellation crashed into Temple Butte, disintegrating on impact and igniting a massive fire. Meanwhile, the United DC-7 fared no better. The collision had severely damaged its left wing, disrupting the aircraft's aerodynamics and rendering it uncontrollable. Captain Shirley and his crew fought desperately to stabilize the plane, but the damage was too extensive. The DC-7 entered a nosedive and crashed into the south face of Chua Butte, scattering debris across the cliffside. The collision was instantaneous, and neither crew had time to react. All 128 passengers and crew members aboard the two planes were killed, making it the deadliest aviation accident in history at that time. In the aftermath of the collision, the remote and rugged terrain of the Grand Canyon posed significant challenges for recovery and investigation efforts. Initial reports of black smoke rising from the canyon came from a sightseeing pilot, and by the afternoon of June 30th, it was clear that both TWA Flight 2 and United Airlines Flight 718 had been involved in a mid-air collision. Rescue teams arrived quickly, but they faced difficult work. There were no survivors. At the time, aviation accident investigations relied heavily on physical evidence and witness testimony. Cockpit voice recorders and flight data recorders, which are now standard in all commercial aircraft, did not exist in 1956. This meant that investigators had to rely on the wreckage, communications logs, and painstaking reconstruction to piece together what had occurred. One of the first clues came from paint transfers found on the wreckage of both aircraft. Red paint from the TWA Super Constellation was discovered on the left wing of the United DC-7, while blue paint from the DC-7 was found on the tail section of the Super Constellation. This confirmed the sequence of the collision. The DC-7's wing had struck the severed Super Constellation's tail. Investigators also reviewed radio communications between the pilots, their respective airline dispatchers, and air traffic control. These logs revealed that both planes had deviated from their original flight plans, likely to provide passengers with a scenic view of the Grand Canyon. The use of visual flight rules, VFR, also played a significant role. Captain Jack Gandy of the TWA Flight 2 had requested clearance to ascend above the clouds to 21,000 feet, but this was initially denied due to the presence of United Flight 718 at the same altitude. Later, under VFR, the TWA crew reported having the United aircraft in sight. However, as the collision demonstrated, this visual separation was either lost or misjudged, possibly due to the cloud cover. The investigation highlighted several systematic issues. Number 1. Lack of coordinated air traffic control. Pilots communicated primarily with their airline's dispatchers, who relayed information to air traffic controllers. This fragmented system often resulted in delays and miscommunication. Number 2. Insufficient radar coverage. Radar systems in 1956 were limited, particularly in remote areas like the Grand Canyon. Neither plane was being actively tracked at the time of collision. Number 3. Freedom of route deviations. Pilots had significant leeway to alter their flight paths under VFR, a flexibility that increased the risk of mid-air conflicts. The findings were a wake-up call for all the aviation industry. The collision exposed the inadequacies of the mid-20th century air traffic control and raised questions about the balance between pilot autonomy and centralized oversight. The public, shocked by the loss of 128 lives, demanded change. While no single individual or group was blamed for the collision, the report acknowledged that both flight crews were operating within rules of the time. This pointed to a deeper issue. The rules themselves were insufficient to prevent such tragedies. The accident marked the beginning of a complete overhaul of the US air traffic control systems, setting the stage for one of the most significant transformations in aviation history. The Civil Aeronautics Administration, CAA, which is the precursor to today's Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, took immediate steps to enhance aviation safety. Among the most significant changes were: number 1, expansion of radar systems; 2, air traffic control modernization; 3, stricter altitude regulations; and 4, programs were updated to emphasize collision avoidance, decision-making under VFR and IFR conditions, and the importance of adhering to flight plans. The collision also spurred the creation of a new regulatory body with broader authority over airspace management. In 1958, just 2 years after the accident, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, was established. The FAA consolidated oversight of both civilian and military air traffic, ensuring that all flights operated under a unified system. The lessons from the Grand Canyon disaster also accelerated the development of onboard safety technologies. By the 1970s, aircraft were equipped with Traffic Collision Avoidance Systems, TCAS, which actively monitor surrounding airspace and alert pilots to potential conflicts. These systems have since become a standard feature in commercial aviation, preventing countless mid-air collisions. Without a doubt, the Grand Canyon collision fundamentally changed the aviation industry, setting the stage for an era of unprecedented safety. Today, air travel is one of the safest modes of transportation, thanks in large part to the reforms that followed this disaster. So, what do you think about the changes that stemmed from this tragic event? Have we done enough to ensure such accidents remain a thing of the past? Or is there even more you think could be done? Don't hesitate to let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more amazing content, and ring the notification bell so you will be among the first to know when we publish next. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.